This is Allie.
And this is Hallie.
And this is Read It Next. Hey guys, and welcome to our B-side episode of From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout.
So if you missed the episode before this, we kind of do a quick little overview of the plot, our rating of it, all of the main stuff you want to know if you're looking for a new book to read. But for this episode, we are going to just dive in and talk about basically our top 5 scenes, some backgrounds on the scenes, how they impact the story, what we learned from them. We're basically going to talk about all of the things that would be considered spoilers that we couldn't really get into in our main episode, but we're going to get into them here. So, just another quick disclaimer, this episode is going to contain spoilers. So, if you are not into spoilers, or if you're somewhere in the middle of the book and really want to keep a clear mind, proceed with caution. I think that's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Proceed with caution.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be definitely touching on some things that you might not want to know yet if you haven't finished, because that book can be spoiled very easily. So.
But if you like spoilers and you're going to read the book anyway, which you really should, super good book, welcome to the B-sides, and we hope you enjoy.
Exactly. So I think we're going to start off with the first scene, even in the book. It's one of the best scenes. It really gets you into it. Honestly, I think this was one of the best first scenes of any book that I've ever read.
It truly sets the tone for the whole story. And I feel like you can't say that a lot with like first scenes. I feel like first scenes like are kind of, they drag, they give you a little, but this first scene truly set the tone for everything.
So this first scene starts with Poppy, and she is in what they call the Red Pearl, which is kind of like a bar, but like a sexy bar.
I kind of say like a speakeasy.
Yeah, a little bit of speakeasy. You know, there's drinking, there's cards going on, there's some dancing physically. There's
private rooms. There's definitely some scandalous stuff going on in this place.
It's definitely nowhere where the maiden should be, that's for sure.
Oh no, 100%. She should not be there.
No, but we don't really know that. We just know that she knows that she shouldn't be there. We don't know why.
Yeah, but Poppy snuck out of Castle Tierman to go to the Red Pearl. Super badass. And I think that's like the first glimpse you get into seeing Poppy breaking this maiden role. Her sneaking out to go to this place. And while it is her first time there, it really still does say a lot that she even did this on her own.
I think it's really important that the first scene that we see of Poppy is her already breaking out of the maiden role. It really shows that even from the beginning, from the moment we met her, she never really wanted it.
So Poppy is playing cards with some guards from the Rise, and we mentioned the Rise before. So basically Macedonia is surrounded by this huge wall called the Rise, but then also each town in Macedonia has their own Rise with their own guards. So Poppy is playing cards with some guards from the Rise in her town, and she learned that a guard has been found killed in the woods.
Yeah, and that's really scary for her because she learns that he's probably killed from one of the Craven. And that also means that anybody else who was with that guard could also have been bitten by the Craven, and the Craven bites spread super fast. So once you get bit by a Craven, you got about, 2-3 days before you turn into a Craven, and then you attack everybody, you attack your family, you have no memory of who you are, you're pretty much just a zombie at that point.
I was gonna say a Craven is kind of like a zombie vampire hybrid sort of deal that we got going on.
Super scary. Definitely would not want to run into those.
So in this scene also, we have the first interaction between Poppy and Hawk.
Yes, we do.
But since Poppy's face has always been hidden by the veil, and here she is also wearing a veil, but it's not as like intense.
It's more of a mask than a veil.
Yeah. But since she is always wearing this, Hawk can't see her face, doesn't know who she is, and she actually is wearing the cloak of one of the housekeepers. So that's who Hawk mistakes her as.
Yeah, so Poppy kind of runs up into his room trying to avoid Victor, which is like her father, but also her main guard. So she knows that if she gets caught by him, she's going to be in huge trouble. So she runs up, goes into a room that this woman says is free, and she goes in, and then all of a sudden, somebody grabs her from behind, and that's Hawk.
And he's basically like, hey, what are you doing in my room? Weren't expecting...
are you following me? Like, why are you here? Like, you're just a maid that I had sex with once.
Like, weren't expecting to see you here. What's going on? There is sort of like a flirty banter between the two, but you can tell that Poppy, at this point, she definitely is more cautious towards Hawk.
She's definitely a bit scared to find this grown man not only talking to her because she's the maiden, that's really not allowed, but touching her. Like, Hawk is all over her, and she's like, I don't know what to do, but I don't think I want it to stop.
Yeah, so there's definitely like a little bit of internal struggle there, but it's interesting to see like that this is their first encounter, and we are already starting off with some lies and secrecy, which really follows these two throughout the whole book.
So once they start, they see each other, and then Hawk, thinking it's the maid, starts making out with her, and Poppy goes with it. She's like, okay, first kiss, let me get with this. And Poppy, you guys should know, does know Hawk. She's seen him around, so she knows exactly who she's kissing, and knows that it might not end up in her favor, but again, she's a deprived young girl. She doesn't care at the moment.
And at this point, she did have like a crush on Hawk.
And who doesn't? And who doesn't?
So I think that was a very good first scene.
Yeah, we already get the connection between them. You're already looking forward to their further interaction, since they started out pretty much just making out with each other.
And you already get a little bit of conflict going on with that guard being found, because if there are cravens so close to the rise, that is never a sign of anything good coming. It's usually just a sign of more craven.
Yeah, and Poppy is one of those people who actually does take care of the craven once they come. She goes off with her guard, Victor, so she knows now she's gonna probably have to be on the lookout and maybe kill one of these craven who has come home to their family.
So the next thing we want to talk about is there is a lady in wait that is killed, and then there is an attack in the gardens that Poppy loves to frequent.
Yeah, and I think it's important to start the scene with one of the lords kind of just, I wouldn't 100%. Say attacking her, but like definitely being a little bit frisky towards her, which is obviously not allowed as the maiden, but he kind of abuses his role of power and is all over her and is kind of threatening her, saying, if you don't do what I want, I'll tell the Duke, and the Duke will punish you. And so she kind of has to stand there and take it, and then all of a sudden they're all called away because another maid is screaming. And what do they find? A lady in wait has been murdered.
To the eye, it looks like a craven attack, but in the back of Poppy's mind, she already feels like it's something else. Something that they kind of even fear, I want to say, more, and that's the Atlanteans, which are from the fallen kingdom of Atlantia, and they're kind of described sort of the same way as craven, but more humane. Like more human aspects instead of just like the zombie vampire mix that we get with the craven.
They're connected to the craven because supposedly the Atlanteans make the craven.
Yes.
So their power, their hunger is all derived just like the craven. And so when she sees the scene, she notices that it looks a little too clean to be a craven. There's no blood. She just kind of seems like she's in a scandalous position. Like, why would she be like that if a craven attacked? And so everyone is kind of a little suspicious about this.
The castle's definitely put on high alert. And you can say the protection around Poppy increases because, again, she's the maiden. If there's anything that they need to do, it's keep her safe, because her life basically ensures the future for the rest of the people in Macedonia.
Yeah. So she's kind of been stuck in her room now. And then I think it's like a night later, like a couple nights later, her guard, Ryland, kind of is like, hey, I'll watch you, but you should go out to the garden. Like, you should follow your routine and pretend like everything's okay. Like, I'll watch you, we'll be safe. And she agrees. And so they go out into the garden and they're looking at the flowers. And then Ryland just kind of falls over.
Yeah, and she can see from the walls in the gardens that there are people like there waiting to attack, and you can tell that Ryland was the first hit target. Like, they wanted to get Ryland out of the way to get to Poppy.
Yeah, and this scene makes me really sad, especially for Ryland. I loved Ryland.
He seemed like a
nice guy, but he did kind of lack on his duty to watch her. Like, he should have seen it coming.
Yes.
He honestly shouldn't have even taken her to the garden, considering everything going on. But he really just wanted to do something nice for Poppy. So this scene is kind of sad. Kind of blew up in their face.
The people who are attacking them, they're known as the dissenters, which are basically the people who don't recognize the king and queen of Macedonia as the true king and queen. They believe that the heir of Atlantia is the true heir to the throne.
When they attack or when they do anything regarding Atlantia or dissenters, they have a phrase from Blood and Ash.
So that's, for one, how we get the title of the book, but that's also the first real dissenter attack that we see, and it is the first hint that there is a threat to Poppy's life. I don't think before this there's been any huge direct attacks towards Poppy, but this is the first one, and it definitely is scary.
She's always been told that if she was ever caught outside with unarmed or whatever, that probably someone like a dissenter will take her as a bargaining chip for the Atlanteans. So she always knew that this was a threat, but it's never actually happened to her.
This scene really highlights why Poppy wants to learn how to fight and protect herself, because if she did not have that fight training that she gets from Victor, she probably would have been taken here.
Yeah, she managed to fight off the dissenter who tries to take her. I think she stabs him. She at least prolongs the attack long enough that he has to run away before the guards catch him. So not only did she prolong it, but she also harmed him. So she did a pretty good job defending herself.
This scene is also super important to the storyline, because this is what leads to Hawk becoming Poppy's new guard, and that leads to their relationship growing more than them just bumping into each other at the Red Pearl. Like, they're going to be in close proximity much more now.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes after the scene was actually at Ryland's funeral, when Victor went up to give his prayers to Ryland. He didn't really want to leave Poppy alone, and Hawk steps up as a guard and says that he'll protect her with his life. And it's the reason why he became one of her guards, because he took that initiative to protect her when no one else would in that moment.
And then this scene, it also really starts to bring a huge distrust, amongst the city, because if dissenters can get in to the Rise and almost take the maiden, and then you also have what looks to be a Craven attack on top of that, it's where is the real protection?
So after Hawk becomes her guard, we start to get introduced to Poppy's lessons with the Duke.
And these lessons were mentioned, they were sprinkled in the beginning, but you never really knew. Here is where you see it firsthand, and this was probably my least favorite scene in the book. It was so hard to read.
It was super hard to read.
It made me so angry, but also so sad, because it's she's been dealing with these arbitrary ass lessons for her entire life.
Yeah, and she gets punished for absolutely everything. She stumbles, she gets punished. She accidentally speaks out of term, she gets punished. It's the craziest simple things that no one should really be punished for, but the Duke will find any reason to lay his hands on her.
And it's crazy, because if you think about it, she's already living by such a strict set of rules already, and then he's putting even more pressure on her by having these expectations that I really don't think he has the right to even have, for one.
No, he gets off on his punishments. Like, this was not to keep her in control. This was just all for his own pleasure.
And I really felt like it was something more personal because during the lesson he does mention her mother.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to touch on her mother. Her mother was supposed to be an ascendant, but she fell in love with Poppy's father, who was not going to ascend. So the queen did make an exception to allow Poppy's mom to just live. And once you learn that, and with the way the Duke spoke about Poppy's mother, it always kind of made me wonder if Poppy's mom was originally supposed to marry the Duke.
Yeah, I think the Duke felt entitled to her mother in some way, and he takes out his revenge on never getting her on Poppy.
This girl already lost her parents at such a young age. You can really tell that she barely knew her mother, and for this man to, for one, throw it in her face and then abuse her like this.
Especially finally seeing the severity of the abuse. It wasn't just even physical. So we do know that most of the abuse is surrounded by like one cane he has, and he would make her undress, which is, it has a sexual aspect, a sexual undertone to it, especially when he brings in the other lord that was living in the castle. So they both took the pleasure of it, and he would usually cane her, like I think the average was like 5 to 10 times depending on the severity of her punishment. She's even mentioned that when he gets drunk, the punishments were worse, that they once knocked her out and just left her to lie on the floor for hours.
And I also think that there is a big shame aspect because of the fact that Poppy is the maiden. She's supposed to be pure, and they're making her completely undress. It does bring, unfortunately, like a bit of shame to her because she's becoming very vulnerable at this point.
But you can see the shame by the fact that she never outright says what happens during her abuse. You know, Hawk will finally ask her, like, what goes on during these punishments, and she refuses to say anything, despite the fact that at that point, I think Hawk has proven that he will do anything to protect her, but she's worried about his safety if she tells, and she also just knows that there's nothing that he can do, so she kind of just keeps her shame to herself.
And what also, like, really kills me during the scene is the fact that Victor knows, like, he definitely has a strong idea of what's going on, and this man is like her father figure, and she says it multiple times that she looks up to him and sees him as a father, but has just continuously like let this go on. And I know, like, he says that he does try to intervene, but at the same time Poppy is still being abused. And there's even a line in the book where he says it shouldn't happen at all. He knows it shouldn't be happening.
He kind of just says, you know, take your role as maiden more seriously, like, don't give him a reason to punish you, which is essentially just victim blaming.
It is extreme victim blaming, and I did kind of lose some respect for Victor at this point. I was like, well, how are you going to say this? For one, she's been a kid this whole time, so how are you going to victim blame a kid?
Yeah, and honestly, she's the daughter that him and his wife never got to have. And I just could not imagine, you know, you have this like daughter figure in your life, and you're not going to protect her from somebody who's literally physically and like sexually, and not even sexually, and mentally abusing her, because because the Duke will tell her how ugly she is because she has scars on her face and throughout her body, tells her that it's a waste that she has that. It really drags down her mental health and the way she perceives herself. And so the Duke's like punishments like transgress through every line of abuse that you can pretty much go through. And Victor never stops it.
I do think it was one of the most important scenes in the book, though, as much as I hate to say it, because I hate this scene so much, because it does show the strength that Poppy has, as well as the anger. And after a while, that anger is going to bubble over. And we do see that anger bubble over a little further in the book, but you see that there's this young girl who's been enduring so much her entire life. Like, that's extremely admirable.
Yeah, I think it's also important to see the scene because at this point we all see Poppy as this symbolic figure, that she's going to save everybody, that she should be treated with like the utmost respect and should be worshipped, and instead she's just being abused.
That's what really blew my mind throughout this whole book is they are constantly saying how the maiden is so revered and is to be worshipped and is the savior to their people, but she's treated like shit.
She's treated like utter garbage. Like, there's nothing that she's allowed to do. She gets punished for absolutely everything. She's just seen as a prop, like a symbolic prop for them to use.
That's really it. She's a symbolic prop, and you can't even say it's like a vanity thing because
No.
you can't see her face. But then I also wonder if the veil even came to play in the stories of like with the first maiden, or if it's strictly because she has the scars.
Yeah, because, like, why would the maiden ever be disfigured like that if she was chosen by the gods?
Exactly.
And I also have to wonder if the veil is just another way to erase her identity.
Oh, I definitely think it is. I 100% think it's because imagine like people can't see you, they don't know what you look like. You're invisible, essentially. She was invisible.
Yeah, and she said that she's invisible. Yeah, it's just a really sad thing that she's gone through this and gone through these abuses in her life that she never should have ever faced.
I also think it really did say something to Poppy that she never once even tried to tell the queen. She just endured it. And I feel like if she did tell the queen like anything, like she would have gotten out of the situation.
Yeah, like we don't know how often the queen visited her, but like she's definitely seen the queen since she went to the castle, and she never, voiced her complaints, voiced anything. She just took it.
Yeah, I think that this would have never even been an option to even happen. But it does say a lot to Poppy's character as well. She really kept this bottled up for years.
100%, because we do know at that point that she is the queen's favorite, and while she probably did have these rules placed on her just because she was the maiden, the abuse never should have happened. And had she told the queen, I have full belief that the queen probably would have killed the duke straight out.
So next we have the rite celebration, which is a very, very big deal. So the rite, at the age of 13, the second daughters and sons in the villages are given to the royal court. And when they reach the age of 19, they're given the opportunity to ascend, which is the highest honor you can be bestowed on by the gods. While the third sons and daughters are given to the priests in the temples of the gods and are known to just like live their entire lives in solitude and live in these temples. But the rite isn't something that is negotiated, because if you realize I said the second daughters and sons and then the third daughters, like it's basically they allow the people to have their one child and that's it. Like any other kids after that, you're giving them up to court or to the temples. Like you don't get to have your family basically.
No, and they've even said that a lot of the times the first kid would die of like a blood disease.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could have a first kid, and then if that kid dies, your second kid goes to the court, and then the third kid goes to be to the temples.
I think what's also quite concerning is a lot of these people don't question it. Like they're okay with doing this because they're appeasing the gods and they're told that the gods are providing them with safety in return. So they are okay with giving up their children so easily.
Yeah, they think that if they don't, then they're all going to be attacked by the Craven. They'll be overrun by them. Essentially, the Ascended are telling them, if you don't give us your kids, you will all die.
So even the sons and daughters that complete their ascension are the ones who go to serve in the temples. Their parents never see their kids again after this.
Yeah, and they don't really question it. They just assume that they're serving in the temple, they're doing their job, serving the gods, but they will never see them again, and they have to accept that.
And it's really seen as like this glorified sacrifice to thank the gods for everything they've done for them.
Like, people will offer up their children. You'll see some families who are a bit more hesitant to do so, like they don't want to give away their children, but some of them actually really just see it as like the biggest offering you could ever do for the gods.
So the rite, it's this huge celebration. Everyone is masked. Poppy mentions that this is her first rite ceremony. So this is like the first real social event that she's ever been to, but she still can't socialize with others. Like, she can't mingle.
No, but she is excited to do this because this is the first time that she's going to be out in public without her veil. She'll still have a mask on, but her hair will finally be free. Most of her face will be free. She's going to be wearing something other than her white maiden gown. So this is kind of the first freedom that these people have ever given her.
And it says a lot. Like, you've gone 19 years really without being at any sort of parties, and they're at court, so you can't say that nothing like this has ever come up before, but this is the first time that Poppy is even able to take just like a little part in it. So at the beginning of the celebration, it is noted that the Duke and Hawk are missing, but a little bit later, Hawk does show up.
I know Poppy was really disappointed to not see Hawk there immediately because she didn't dress up for him, but she definitely wanted to see his reaction to her being dressed up.
Because at this point, like, their relationship is it's teetering more on flirtation than a strict guard and charge relationship.
They're definitely a lot more friendly than she's really ever gotten with anybody, even Tawny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Poppy and Hawk do leave the party for a bit. They walk through the gardens, and this leads to some flirting and kissing between the two.
Yeah, definitely some heavy petting and just things that would not be allowed of the maiden. But she's the one who initiates it. She asks for it. This is another moment of her rejecting her role and is coming closer to rejecting it altogether.
And definitely taking even just like the slightest bit of control in her life. Like, even if it's something as small as asking Hawk for a kiss, it's something that she wanted,
it's
not
her
something that
choice.
was exactly. And at this point, Hawk pretty much tells her that like he 100% sees her as Poppy the person and not Penelope the maiden.
Yeah, which is something that you can definitely see once Hawk starts to take Poppy back and they run into Victor. And Victor is very upset because he can obviously tell that they've been at least making out.
Yeah, like this is still something that is an extreme taboo for Poppy.
Like, when she's doing these things, when she's rejecting her role, she doesn't know what would happen, but she knows that has the possibility of being rejected by the gods, which is pretty much a death sentence to her.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like she has spent her entire life as she knows it following these rules. She's coming to a point where she does have the right to start questioning her role.
Yeah, she's coming upon her ascension, and she doesn't know what ascension is, except, the greatest blessing that you'll ever have. But since she's the one leading the ascension, pretty much, she doesn't know what her job entails. So she starts to worry, she starts to question everything, and that's really where this rejection of her role comes in.
I think an important line in this part is when Victor says, "It's time to go back to your room, maiden." And there's an emphasis on that word, maiden. He doesn't call her Poppy, which is what he usually does. He doesn't say Penelope. And I honestly, like, that is such a huge snub in the face to Poppy. And it really just emphasizes that she is supposed to be her role. She's not supposed to be a person.
Yeah, Victor's seeing her right now as the maiden, and as seeing the breaking the rules as the maiden. This isn't Poppy running off with some boy and he's upset because, she's a young girl running off with some man. He's upset because it's the maiden running off and doing this, and that's strictly against the rules. Hawk doesn't really take this. He kind of, once Victor says that, he says, "I was in the process of escorting Penelope back to her rooms," with emphasis on her name, because he sees her as a real person. And then even afterwards, Victor asks, "Do you understand what she is?" Not even who she is, what she is. She is something. She's not a person.
And Hawk says, "I know exactly who she is." And I really loved that parallel between the two, because at this point, these are two extremely important men in Poppy's life. And you have one who is the father figure treating her as this thing, as opposed to this new guard that like she does kind of have a crush on, but even aside from that, he's treating her as a person.
And he's really the only person to ever do this for her.
That has to be like a huge reprieve for Poppy to at least have one person not hold this title over your head, because that's what it really felt like throughout a lot of the book, that her role as the maiden was, I felt it was kind of thrown around as a threat to her sometimes.
Well, yeah, because there's always the threat of being punished or being rejected by the gods. She has to hold in everything that she knows about herself, her whole personality. She can't live her life all just for the sake of other people. This is the first instance that we see Poppy actually vocalize that she might not want this role, that she's never been able to live, that she can't do anything, that everything that they have that is their right to do in their life is a privilege for her. She can't do any of it.
Yes. And then I think this is when you really start to see that anger start to bubble over, because she's starting to get extremely fed up, like with the way she's treated, with the expectations she's supposed to comply to for her entire life. So after that intense little standoff between Hawk and Victor brings her back inside, and they're passing the Great Hall where the party is, where they hear screaming.
Yep, and they run in, and hanging from like the railings of the ceiling, like the rafters, is the Duke's body with the cane that he uses to punish her struck through his chest.
We love poetic justice
We
in this
really
podcast.
do.
So the Duke is, boom, dead in front of everyone to see. And at this point, it was kind of a mystery too if Ascended could be killed, I believe.
Yeah, so this is the first time that we see an Ascended die, and now at this point, everybody in that room is freaking out, so they're all trying to protect, one, the Duchess, and now the Maiden. And that's when all these other people start to come in, and they're clearly not with the party, and they start attacking everyone. They start shooting people with arrows, and they all get separated, they all get trampled, and Poppy just starts trying to find Tawny, and she's trying to save all the girls, but people just keep dying.
So it's like right as everyone is trying to process the death of the Duke, there's a dissenter attack.
And so once they all reconvene, she's seen countless, they weren't her friends, but girls her age die. She's seen everyone that she's pretty much seen every day of her life now just be struck down. So Poppy, Tawny, the Duchess, Victor, and Lord Mazine all go and find safety in this one room. And then that's when the dissenters find them trapped, and they're all trapped in a room. They pretty much kind of cornered themselves in.
It was crazy because like the Duchess swore up and down that they were going to be safe in this room, and then like 2 seconds later,
they just start breaking down the doors. And this is the first time that the Duchess especially sees that Poppy's not defenseless. She can fight. And so she doesn't know how this happens, but Poppy then takes a sword and starts striking down the dissenters as they come in.
And I think at this point, the Duchess does start fighting as well, right?
Yeah. We've never really seen why the Ascended didn't ever help on like the rise with the Craven. They're never seen actually fighting. They're always putting other people who aren't as immortal, who aren't as indestructible as they are, in the path to defend them. But this is the first time where, nope, now the Ascended actually have to fight for their lives.
And this scene was sad. Like, it was sad, but I also wasn't completely heartbroken over it. This is the scene where Victor is killed.
Yeah. They all think that they killed all the Descenders, but one more comes through and gets Victor, essentially, and Poppy kills him in revenge, but cannot save Victor. And one of the lines that I think is so essential to kind of Victor's character in general is, as he's dying, he says, "I'm sorry for not protecting you. I failed you as a man. Forgive me." Because, like we said, he's known this whole time the abuse that Poppy has suffered, and he knew that he was in the wrong for never stopping it. So this is his final way just to be like, "I'm sorry that I let this go on for so long."
And at this point, Hawk has found them in this room, and Lord Mazine is really just taunting her at this point, and it's so irritating. Like, he keeps telling how like she's really not that defenseless. She probably didn't need as many guards. He's been one of her tormentors for her entire stay at Castle Tierman, and for him to just keep pushing and pushing like this, Poppy finally she breaks.
She absolutely breaks, and she just attacks him. She grabs the sword, she cuts off his arm, she just stabs him, and it was really the first instance that we see that rage just explode from her.
I feel like with anyone else, it would be seen as overkill. But given the situation that Poppy has been in for such a long time, it was well deserved. It was like a total mic drop moment.
It was definitely justified considering what he's done to her. It was honestly one of my favorite parts in the book.
The scene was so well written as well. Like, this entire section of the book, I found it to be so well written because it gave a lot of suspense and a lot of action. It's just like, whoa, like, because at this point it's like you are really just surprised one page after the other. I would go back and reread a page before going to the next page because I want to make sure that I was really picturing it correctly.
Yeah, no, I love this scene. When I honestly think of this book, I think of the whole Rite event itself, and specifically this scene because it stands out so much.
And then I think this is also the scene where Poppy's life as she really knows it is just completely flipped on its head. Like, the threat of the Centers on her life is so imminent and so close to home now that there has to be a huge change.
Yeah, it can no longer be ignored. It can no longer be swept under the bed. It has to come out now. And so this is the first scene that really initiates the changes in her life, because after this, she has to leave because she can't stay in the castle anymore.
And she's been summoned to the capital by the Queen, which that's really how you know that it's a big threat to be summoned by the Queen when she's been living at Castle Tierman for so long. And Hawk is the one who is now sort of like her main guard, and he is tasked with getting her to the capital.
Yeah, our next important part that we want to go over. So she has to leave the castle, and Hawk gets his own guards that are handpicked for this, and they head off, and they can't take the main roads because obviously the dissenters might attack, so they have to take the challenging road through, and that starts with the Blood Forest.
And from the name of it, you can just tell that this is not going to be an easy road at all. I feel like anything with the word blood in it, you can expect some craziness to go down.
They all know it's dangerous, but this is unfortunately the only route they can take.
And then there are rise guards, but then, like Ali said, there is a guard that Hawk got to choose, and that's Kieran. And Kieran is also like a huge mystery to like the other guards in the castle. Like, him and Hawk, none of the other guards know anything about them, just that they came from the capital with glowing recommendations.
Yeah, they kind of came out of nowhere. They kind of surprised all the guards about how quickly they've just raised in the ranks. It's a little bit suspicious, but like, for all they know, they're just super good at their jobs.
And they're riding through the forest. Poppy can't ride a horse, so she's riding with Hawk.
Yeah, really just nestled right in there.
And after their little scene at the right, things are there's some tension there.
Yeah, because, they've come from pretty much making out to defending each other. She goes into a depression, but now this is like the real first time that they've kind of been together since it all happened.
Yeah. And of course, in the Blood Forest, they run into some rats. And now that I'm looking at the word, I feel like I should have known that they're basically giant rats, and rats is literally in the word, and the fact that I did not make that connection until now is embarrassing. I don't like vermin, so I just picture them as like giant like chipmunks or something.
Which I think is kind of funny, imagining these chipmunks trying to kill everybody. I personally
like
keep them as
chipmunks.
rats in my head, but
No, I don't like to see it. But they're forced to stop for the night in the woods, and it's freezing in these woods, and Hawk offers to sleep with Poppy because, you know, body heat,
yeah.
things of that nature. But Hawk is also being resident hot guy Hawk. You know, they're under disguise right now. No one really knows she's the maiden. So
He kind of gives her the offer that, like, I know how to make you relax. And she's like, trust me, nothing can make me relax right now. And he's kind of like, bet. So they start to get a little intimate. He never really touches her, but he does touch her above her clothes. And
it's the first real like explicit like intimate scene between the two. It's a further extension of the garden scene where we really see like Poppy really dismissing her role as the maiden because she knows that this should not be happening. But she also doesn't make the real jump to stop it.
Yeah. No, she knows what she's doing is wrong, but if anything, I think she likes it. Like, there's like an element of, I shouldn't be doing this, but this feels so good, and it's Hawk, and obviously Hawk, I can trust him with anything, and when else am I ever going to experience this?
So the next day, they're still in the Blood Forest, and there's a Craven attack, which we really should have seen coming because there were so many Craven like already close to the rise that it's not a surprise that there's a Craven attack in the Blood Forest, and Poppy fights alongside her guards, which does come as a surprise to them because she's the maiden. But unfortunately, 2 of her guards do die in this attack. After the Craven attack, they arrive at this small village, and there's no Lord Ascendant there, which Poppy finds weird as heck. And when she asks about it, she's just told that he's out hunting, which she also finds strange because the Ascendant they're known for not doing any type of labor or anything on their own.
They really don't do physical activity. They're just kind of like luxury defined. They just lounge around. They don't do anything. So when she finds out that these Ascendants are apparently hunting, she's like, oh, weird. But at this point, she doesn't really have a lot of reason to question anything, so she just goes with it.
And what she also finds strange is that the people in the village, they seem to know Hawk and Kieran already. And when she asks them about it, they just like both kind of like brush it off and like, yeah, like we've been to this village like once or twice before, but they never really go into it. But one of the lines at this point, Poppy says, it seems like they've been graced by royalty. And I think it's like Hawk or something goes, it must be a slow day for them. It's either Hawk or Kieran that says that, but that was a very interesting exchange between the two.
Yeah, it was a little, kind of like a little foreshadowing. So they go into the, what was it, like a cabin? The manor?
I think it was like a manor.
Yeah, so they go into the manor, they check in, they get like their own room, and so Poppy kind of is, after her night together with Hawk, she kind of is ready to take it to the next step. This is her real rejection of her role, complete rejection at this point. She decides that she doesn't want to do this anymore. She doesn't want to go to the capital. She'll either run away alone or maybe bring Hawk if he's willing to. She just really wants to be with Hawk at this point. So when Hawk comes in, she kind of just strips for him.
At this point, it's quite obvious that her role as the maiden is kind of just really in the back of her head. Like, it's not such a priority as it once was for her.
And to her, after spending the night once with Hawk, she already kind of believes that the gods will reject her. She has no chance for ascension. So at this point, she kind of has to cut her losses and run.
Also, a little bit of a foreshadowing. Hawk says something very interesting. He says, promise me you won't forget this. That no matter what happens tomorrow, the next day, next week, you won't forget this. Forget that this was real. And considering that this was her first time, the fact that she was the maiden, this is very important to her.
This is easily one of the most important moments in her life because, you know, she's never had this option before in her life. She's never had this choice, and she's never had somebody to do it with, somebody who she trusted that much. Hawk knows this, and Hawk has some secrets of his own, and he's afraid that once they get out, that she's not going to see him anymore, and he doesn't want to ruin this for her. He doesn't want her to think that he's been using her like that.
So then a few hours after this, one of the castle guards that rode into them notices that 2 of the other guards that rode with them are missing, and this village seems kind of off, especially the fact that it's nighttime and the lord of the village still hasn't shown up. And this guard kind of urges Poppy to leave the village with him, and right off the bat she thinks that he's a dissenter because that would be a really great way to get her away from everyone. But this is disproven pretty quickly. They're on their way, ready to leave, and Kieran, Hawk's friend, catches them. And this scene was a huge plot twist, and I think it was probably the best one in the book.
This is the best plot twist I've ever read in any book.
We learn in the scene that Kieran is a wolven, which is...
It's essentially a werewolf, but they've devoted their lives to the Atlanteans.
And they're essentially in a village of dissenters. And these dissenters don't like Poppy or what she stands for and want nothing to do with her. And it again leads to yet another threat on Poppy's life where they try to kill her.
Yeah, so once they run away from Kieran, they are found in a barn, and Poppy kind of has to fight for her life. All her guards now have been killed, and once she fights and finally gets captured by Hawk, she's dragged down into the catacombs pretty much of this manor. She's trapped in there, she's guarded. The person that she had attacked originally in the gardens at the beginning of the book, and it was also one of the people she attacked in the barn, kind of wants his revenge now. And so he brings a whole bunch of people who aren't happy that Poppy's there and attacks her.
And after this attack is where we get another huge plot twist. Because Poppy, she could die at this moment, but someone calls for Prince Castile, and we learned that Prince Castile is Hawk, aka the Dark One, the person Poppy's been protected from her entire life. While she did not know anything about this, he knew who Poppy was from the beginning, and Poppy has just been a bargaining chip for him.
This is kind of just the ultimate betrayal for her. It kind of brings back into the quote of remember that this is real, but now how is she going to think that any of that's real? She doesn't. She thinks that he's betrayed her not only to essentially bargain her life, but also to sleep with her. It's the ultimate betrayal for her. And this scene gets me just so angry. When I was rereading this book for the second time, I could not even get through this last part of the book because I was just so angry at him for doing this.
So yeah, we learned that Hawk has been playing a game this whole time, but he also comes with some pretty juicy info. We learned that Atlantia is not fallen. It's actually a thriving kingdom. The Craven are not a byproduct of the Atlanteans, but they're actually a byproduct of the Ascended. And Atlantean blood is needed to create Ascendant or vampires, as we learn they are. And they have Hawk's brother, who is the heir to the Atlantean throne. And this is really just the plot takes such a crazy turn, because everything Poppy's been told her entire life is turning out to be a lie, but it's also coming from a guy who just lied to her about who he was. So she's really on this edge of what exactly do I believe?
Yeah, and so she's kind of scared in this moment, and he did heal her with his blood, and she's just kind of freaked out, and she gets close to him because originally when she got healed with his blood, she got a little turned on. That's a side effect. So she crawls over to him, and once it starts wearing off, she takes her knife and stabs him in the heart. And that's when she runs away because she's trying at this point to run for her life. She thinks that Hawk is going to kill her, that everyone in this village is going to finish what they didn't start. They're going to finish what they started. And so she just takes off. Unfortunately for her, that's not how you kill an Atlantean. So he takes a couple minutes to heal himself and chases after her, and he's pissed because he just got stabbed in the heart, which is still painful even if you do survive. At this moment, he catches up with her, and the first thing he does is bites her in the neck. And so that's painful for her until, again, it starts to feel really good and they both get turned on. But this sheds some light onto some information that neither Poppy or Hawk knew, which is that Poppy is actually at least half Atlantean. She has Atlantea blood in her.
And this is really what being the maiden was, because we learned that Atlantean blood is needed to make more ascended, and Poppy was seen as the savior of their society. They wanted to use Poppy for her blood.
Yeah, and so I think Hawk kind of makes that connection right then and there. And even he, at that point, was never actually planning on using her as a bribe tool anymore. He did fall in love with her at some point, but now knowing this fact that they were not only torturing her for her whole life, but was just going to continue that torture as she got older and use her pretty much the same way that he was used when he was captured.
It didn't sit right with him.
No, it's furthermore reason why he needs to protect her.
And, in order to provide that protection, Hawk has the great idea to propose marriage.
Yeah, they go to sit down, have something to eat after, she stabs him and they all get through that. And he kind of just goes, yeah, we're gonna get married. And that's where that book leaves off.
And it's not even like a real proposal. It's like it's just a declaration. It's like, yeah, we're getting married.
It's kind of like a joke at that point.
That's where the book ends off. And I was like, no, I need the next one right this second. That was probably one of the best cliffhangers I've ever read.
It was the best cliffhanger I've ever read. I've never wanted to know more of a story so bad.
And I hate cliffhangers, but
it was
good
so
one.
Well done that you can't even be mad that it left on a cliffhanger.
Because you got so much information in that chunk of the book. It's just like, okay, this is a cliffhanger, but so many things have been brought to light that you're kind of okay with it because you're able to process it.
Yeah, you finally get all the answers that you've been waiting for the whole book. And it's all very much at the end, and then it ends on that cliffhanger.
It's definitely it's just an explosion at that point, and it was so well done. I kind of want to reread it again, but I know we have other books to get through. But no, it was good.
Yeah, it was a super good book to read. One of the most entertaining that I've read this year, definitely.
It really keeps you enthralled for the rest of the series.
Yeah, so in our next episode, we will finally introduce you to A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and that's the sequel to this book where we get all the answers that we were kind of left off in this cliffhanger.
Yeah, be on the lookout for that one, and we hope you enjoyed this B-side of Read It Next.
Yeah, thank you for joining in.